I guess I'm going to do something kind of uncharacteristic and pop off a hot take without thinking about it for like 6 months. So I've been seeing a lot of people on Twitter, a lot of which are in me mentions, discussing death of the author and asking how we should apply this to our newly out and proud, incredibly transphobic Rowling. The warning signs were there. It kind of began, it was like a few months ago when people were noticing that she was liking some really hardcore right-wing TERFy tweets. TERF meaning trans-exclusionary radical feminist. Like I'm not wild about the term for accuracy reasons, but just so we re-clear, it is not a slur. So anyway, she was liking some TERFy stuff and then she started retweeting it. What's the step beyond showing your slip? It's like her dress got caught in her underwear, with the most hilarious oops of a tweet that has ever maybe happened with someone with more than 1 million followers, and then she just doubled down from there. And so like just within the last 24 hours, we have her comparing providing gender services to young people with gay conversion therapy, linking to fringe weirdos and Medium posts, like it's like some authority. And as is the case with so many transphobes, she is arguing against opposition that nobody actually has. No one is saying chromosomes are not real, Joan. Now, if we wanted to get into that, that is its whole other thing. But suffice to say that biological sex is in fact much more complicated than the simplex anti-chromosome. Trans YouTuber Riley Dennis did a video on the subject a few years ago, so I'll go ahead and link to that, and I'll let her speak to that issue. That's not what we re-talking about. We re-talking about death of the author. So death of the author when the author, a very successful and wealthy author, outs themselves as a bigot. Now, it is entirely possible that you do not care, and you genuinely do believe in separating art from the artist. And if that is the case, you flee free, little bird. This video is not for you. Stop watching now. Go enjoy Fantastic Beasts 5 or whatever. But here's the problem with even applying death of the author to this discussion, is basically you are trying to find an academic solution for an emotional and ethical problem. As I said on my video on the subject, I personally believe that you can't really practice death of the author in its purest pure form, if for no other reason than if you err in any kind of like discourse setting, be it academic or Twitter. Other people aren't going to really allow it. They will bring the author into it, and that is going to introduce subconscious biases, which is of course going to affect your reading of the text, no matter how hard you try to be unbiased or whatever. So you can try to practice death of the author, but as long as you re-engaged in a community, other people are probably going to bring the author in, whether you want them to or not. So I think that part of the reason why there are a lot of really confused emotions about Rowling going hard turf is because so many people have an attachment to Harry Potter. It was a part of their childhood. It was a part of their adolescence. It is deeply, deeply important to some people. Maybe like 10 or 20 years ago, I would have been like smug about this, but I feel for the Harry Potter fans of the world. Harry Potter, like I didn't hate it, but like Harry Potter was never my thing, obviously. I never talk about it on this channel. You know, like I read the books. I even gave it a shout out in me book, which I'm kind of regretting now. Whoops. I just needed a book that came out in 2007. But Harry Potter was blowing up around the same times that Lord of the Rings was having its resurgence in popularity, and the relationship of the author to that text is a completely different discussion and one we are not going to have here. Tolkien has been dead for 50 years. He's not on Twitter. But Rowling is not only alive, She's also relatively young and has tremendous power and influence and a lot of followers and a lot of money and a lot of control of her intellectual property. And I've seen a lot of takes and I don't really want to address them all, but basically you can't try to be rational about the whole thing and be like, don't to support her financially, but the reality is it's a lot more complicated than that. So while on some level there is a sort of broader political discussion on how she wields her influence, really when people want to talk about death of the author, in this instance, they want to reconcile their personal feelings about Harry Potter with the author. Like how do I reconcile the fact that the author of this series is using her power to do such incredible harm, all while genuinely believing that she's doing the right thing, with the fact that this series was so formative for so many people? How do you reconcile this? The answer to that is I don't know. But I have kind of touched on this subject before a long time ago, and I think you can find it on me other channel. I did a video that kind of touched on a similar topic about Orson Scott Card, who is the author of Ender's Game. And it wasn't me, like Harry Potter or anything, because I was older when I read it, but it was extremely formative for me, especially as a professional author. In particular, the sequel to Ender's Game, Speaker for the Dead, was extremely influential, and if you re-familiar with it, you all be like, ah, I can see that. Like, even the title of the Axioms End sequel, which is called Truth of the Divine, is kind of it takes some inspiration from Speaker for the Dead. So I remember a long time ago, people would talk about Orson Scott Card on Twitter. And at first, I kind of was inclined to disbelieve them, mostly because I could really reconcile the fact that the same person who wrote this work, which is fundamentally about the importance of understanding someone or something that is very different from you, with this incredible homophobic bigots. And it's not that this guy just has some bad Twitter opinions. He openly advocates against gay and trans people, and he uses his not inconsiderable wealth to do so. And unlike Joan, he, for the most part, has the good sense to keep his bullshit off Twitter, but he is still mostly on his bullshit, and was on Ben Shapiro's channel as recently as 2 months ago. Orson Scott Card is still alive, and there is a difference between a dead author that maybe has a checkered past and a living one who is using their not inconsiderable wealth and power to advocate against marginalized groups. And this is one of the most insidious aspects of Rowling doing what she's doing. She knows that because of her wealth and influence, she's going to be believed more than the lived experience of trans people and decades of medical research. And now there are a lot of people who are perfectly willing to compartmentalize, and again, I see separate art from the artist constantly. And you know what? That's fine. You know what? You do you. Again, this discussion is not for you. This is for the people who are trying to figure out how to reconcile having Harry Potter in their past and in their lives with the way she is wielding her power. And sort of the way that Orson Scott Card's hope in bigotry has influenced the way that I read the Ender series. I think people kind of know that knowing this about the author is going to affect how they read and engage with the Harry Potter series. And if it was formative for them, if it was a big part of their childhood or adolescence, or even if it is still a big part of your life, that is going to influence the way you remember it or the way you experience it. And while you can absolutely control the way you read or engage with a text, you cannot control the way an author uses their money and influence. Even case in point, right now I am using relative extremely micro influence to advocate against what Rowling is advocating for. And if you disagree with me, bye. Felicia. See, normally I work off a script, so this is very unnatural for me. As you can see, I like my ring light and my degree over there. See, I'm a professional. I know for a lot of people there would be no forgiveness for them, and I can understand that. I think on some level I would have to agree. But as it stands right now, all signs point to this is where her train is going, that she's not going to change. What is probably going to happen is she and her social circle is going to become more and more insular, and she's going to distance herself from people that she used to work with, like the entire cast of the Harry Potter movies. And she's gonna get love bombed by not only people who agree with her, but people who probably have much more far-right beliefs about trans people than even Rowling does. I have seen people argue that once a text is in the world, regardless of how much the author tries to influence people's reading of it once it's out there, the text no longer belongs to them. And on a certain level, I do agree with that. However, there are few creators that are as deeply entrenched in the world they created as J.K. Rowling. Like SZ, for instance, let's say that George Lucas goes off the deep end and, like, chains himself to a Confederate statue that is slated for removal. He's not really got anything to do with Star Wars anymore, but J.K. Rowling is Harry Potter. She has made sure of that. And this is sort of a unique franchise in that you can't really consume and advocate for it without indirectly doing the same for the author. And she knows this, which is why she's kind of decided that this is the hill she's going to die on. She has a lot of power and influence, especially in the cook, where shameless turfery is a lot more normalized than it is here in the US. It's like the one thing that we are slightly less shitty about: winning. So here's the thing. If you like, I don't know, never watch another Harry Potter movie again, or sell your books to a used bookstore or something, that isn't really going to change anything. Like, the number of consumers who are going to change their habits because of this thing is vanishingly small. But whenever you take the concept of death of the author and basically proclaim that the text belongs to the reader now, this is a way to reconcile your own personal, emotional attachment to this text, and that's fine. However, you can't really cry death of the author and keep consuming Harry Potter stuff without supporting her wealth and influence. And honestly, what she is doing does scare me, like such to the point that I would, make a YouTube video in my pajamas reacting to the discussion of death of the author as it pertains to J.K. Rowling. I think we at an important crossroads where trans visibility is concerned, and we could either go forward or we could see the loss of what gains we have made. And I don't want to think about what going backward might look like. And like, turfery is a spectrum. There are a lot of gender-critical people. That's what they call themselves they know they are transphobic. They have like terrible, terminologies that they use. They actively try to do harm for people. They know what they're redoing. But Rowling is in this camp where I don't think she believes she's transphobic. I think she genuinely believes that she's doing the right thing, which is why I don't think she's going to change. So again, with this discussion, we are dealing with two separate issues. How do you personally reconcile your relationship to this text? And how do we as consumers interact with J.K. Rowling's intellectual property? Obviously, if Harry Potter never meant anything to you, you keep doing you, boo. Advocate against her positions. You can try to reason with her on Twitter. Good luck. But if you cry death of the author and decide to ignore the author, yet you continue to consume her product, that is a form of empowerment. Rowling only has this massive platform because of her influence, which comes from her creative output. And the only way her influence is reduced is if businesses decide that she's too toxic to be associated with. Now, I think in a weird way, the case of Rowling, suddenly making this heel turn is a pretty extreme case because there are a very Very few authors in this world with the kind of influence that she has. So if Harry Potter means so much to you that you genuinely can't let it go and you desire to compartmentalize the author with the text, then go ahead. But, like, don't try to morally justify it if you understand that Joanne's position and influence comes from the fact that so many people consume her text. So normally I might advocate for a sort of wishy-washy. It's your own personal relationship to the text thing. But in this case, I don't think that death of the author can apply. The fact that she is so deeply entwined in the world she created is why she has so much power. So from an academic standpoint, it's fine. That's why death of the author exists. It's supposed to be this, emotionless, manly way of engaging with texts. But from an ethical standpoint, if you really don't want to support the author, you might just need to let Harry Potter go. And I feel like what I'm seeing is a lot of people who are not ready to do that. Again, to draw the point of comparison with me and Orson Scott Card, I can accept that Orson Scott Card was very formative and influential to me. But I am past the point where I am willing to consume or enjoy his work. And I cannot encourage others in good conscience to do the same. So we know that this kind of comes off like I'm saying, boycott Harry Potter because the author has some bad Twitter opinions. But I think that if this is an issue that you really care about, you kind of have to. And to be clear, I don't want to insinuate that it's either or. Either the author has a spotless past and is completely unproblematic and therefore it's ought to consume their work or cancel Jack Rowling. That is not what I'm saying, because again, Jake Rowling is a pretty extreme case because she's so famous. And I don't think I can overstate the amount of harm she is doing right now by tweeting this dangerous crap to her 14 million followers. She is normalizing misinformation and making it genuinely dangerous for trans people to exist. And that makes me mad. I don't like it. Mom. People in the last video asking, do you really drink that much Canada Dry diet? Yes. Yes, I do. So, again, I think we're kind of dealing with a strange and unique case of author doing real harm who thinks she is doing good, but is the owner of a text that is arguably the most popular franchise that has happened in the last 30 years. That is what the issue is here. And that is why I felt it was important enough to even talk about to wield my power. And I, an author who not even published and all the wichtige he thought who and actually, because here's the thing. I actually honestly, and I don't like talking about me personal feelings because I like to pretend that I don't have any. But I kind of was waffling on whether or not I should even say something because I have a book coming out in like 2 weeks. And as a debut author, it maybe isn't the best idea to publicly advocate one of the most successful living authors. And I don't want it to sound like it's this moral hoity-toity thing, but it kind of just was the right thing to do. And I know it is. I had so much coffee today. My hands are shaking. Oh, why did I do it? And I think in a situation like this, it isn't just about death of the author. It is about advocacy. And what she is doing right now is normalizing some really insidious stuff. So, yeah, I don't really know how to end this. Obviously, I kind of put this together on the fly. She's still trending on Twitter. She's been trending all day. I don't know. Stop boying Harry Potter stuff. Donkey Kong says trans rights. Good night.